She had been in the Harlan jail for 12 days when the letter came, slid under the door of her cell in the gray hour before the transport wagon was due, and she knew, before she picked it up, that it had been opened already, because the seal was broken and the envelope had been refolded with the crease going the wrong way. She had been sentenced for poisoning a man she had tried to save, in a proceeding where the counsel had spoken for 40 minutes, and she had been permitted to say nothing. The letter was addressed to a dead man. His name was on the front of the envelope in a hand she did not know, and beneath the name was his ranch address, and in the upper left corner was the name of a surveying firm in the county seat. She had been sentenced before she could speak. Whatever was in that letter had arrived 11 days too late, unless the arrival of it this morning meant something she had not yet worked out. She had been Ostergaard's healer and cook for 2 years. The ranch was a working spread east of Harlan, cattle and some horses, a bunkhouse with 6 hands, and a main house where the old man lived alone after his wife went back to her family in the east. He was not a young man, and his health was not a young man's health, and the arrangement had been practical on both sides. She had a place to work and live, and he had someone who could prepare the medicines that kept his chest from closing in the autumn and his joints from seizing in the cold. He had trusted her. That was the thing she kept returning to in the 12 days of the jail. The plain fact of it. He had trusted her with the medicines and the preparation and the dosing, had trusted her to know what a particular root could do in a particular quantity, had trusted her judgment about when to push and when to hold back. He had never been a demonstrative man, but there had been a quality of ease in the way he received her work that she had understood as a form of confidence. She had that trust in her memory, and Harmond had taken it and turned it into the instrument of her conviction, and for 12 days she had not been able to do anything about that. He had died of a fever in the 3rd week of September. She had stayed with him through 4 days of it, had prepared everything she knew to prepare, had not left his side except to boil water, and had not slept more than an hour at a time. She had talked to him through the 2nd night when the fever was at its worst, not because she thought he could hear her, but because the sound of a calm voice does something for the room even when the patient cannot register it, and she had wanted the room to have something calm in it. On the 5th morning he was gone. She had sat in the chair beside his bed for a long time before she understood it was over, and then she had sat there a little longer, because there was no particular reason to stand up. She had been arrested 8 days later. The charge was poisoning. Birch Harmond had presented the case to the town council himself, in a room she was brought to under guard, and he had shown the council her herb pouch, and a paper he said was a physician's analysis of its contents, and he had said that the herbs she had given Ostergaard were known to cause fever and organ failure in sufficient quantity, and that this was not a healer's accident, but a calculated act. She had not been permitted to speak. She had tried once, and the council chairman had said the proceeding did not require the defendant's testimony at this stage, which was not a statement she recognized from any law she had encountered, but she had no lawyer, and the room had not been inclined to question the chairman. The herb pouch sat on the shelf in the jail office. If you have made it this far into Ida's story, hit subscribe, because what happens next is the part I have been waiting to tell you. She had seen it there, through the open door on the 3rd day. It contained the chamomile, and the willow bark, and the dried elderberry, and the small packet of ground ginger she had been using for his chest, and it was the evidence of her attempt to save him, and it had been turned into something else entirely. The letter was addressed to a dead man. She read it anyway. It was from a man named Fenwick at a surveying firm. It said that Harmond had filed a competing land claim against Ostergaard's eastern pasture using a survey instrument that Fenwick believed to be forged, and that the filing was due to be confirmed by the county registry unless Ostergaard filed a formal challenge within 30 days of the date of the letter. The letter was dated 45 days ago. The 30-day window had been open for 2 weeks after Ostergaard died, and it had closed before she was arrested, and Harmond had known it would. The filing had been confirmed 3 days after Ostergaard died. She had not known this. She did not think Ostergaard had known it either. She read the letter twice. Then she read it a third time, more slowly, looking at the specific language of it, the particular way the surveyor had phrased the problem with the instrument. He was not accusing Harmond directly. He was describing a discrepancy and noting that the discrepancy bore looking into. He was writing to a man he believed to be alive and capable of acting on the information. He had written to a dead man, and the letter had been opened before it reached her. Someone had read it and put it back and slid it under her door this morning. She did not know yet who had done that, or why this morning, with the transport due at 3. She was still holding the letter when the door of the jail opened. Not the sheriff, a man she had not seen before, iron-gray hair cut short and neat, blue-gray eyes pale and sharp behind the kind of face that had watched a number of things happen and had its own opinions about most of them. He moved with controlled deliberateness, and there was a stiffness in his left leg that she noticed, because she noticed those things. He wore a brown canvas jacket over a white shirt, both clean but not new. He said, "I sent it." She said, "Who are you?" He said his name was Levi. He said he had been working east of town for 3 months. He said he had found the letter in Ostergaard's saddlebag when he was helping pack the ranch effects after the death, and that he had held it for 11 days, trying to decide what to do with it. She said, "Why did you wait 11 days?" He said, "Because using it means standing in front of a court and telling them what I know, and I have reasons to avoid courts." She said, "What reasons?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I was convicted of a crime I did not commit in Cimarron County 6 years ago. I served 2 years. I was released on a technicality that did not include an acknowledgement that the conviction was wrong." He said it plainly, without asking for sympathy, the way a man reports a weather condition that affects his plans. She said, "And Harmond is connected to that." He looked at her. She said, "You did not come to this county by accident." He said, "No." He had spent 2 years riding toward a moment that was now asking him to choose between himself and her. She understood that before he finished explaining it, and she did not make it smaller than it was by pretending she had not understood. She said, "Tell me what you have." He sat down across from her on the floor of the jail cell, his back against the opposite wall, which she understood was a practical choice. Sitting on the floor put him below the level of the cell door's small barred window and made him less visible from the corridor. The man who had framed Levi in Cimarron County 6 years ago was a land broker named Castor. Castor and Harmond had worked together on at least 3 land acquisitions in the years before Levi's conviction, acquisitions that followed the same pattern. A landowner died or was discredited, a competing claim filed in advance of the death or conviction, and the land transferred to a holding company that listed Harmond as a principal. Levi had assembled this over 2 years of careful riding and record-checking across 3 counties. He had found documents. He had found people who remembered. He had found a surveyor named Fenwick who had been troubled by one of the instruments he had been asked to certify and had kept a copy of his concern. She said, "How did you find Fenwick?" He said, "I found the instrument first, the filing on the land adjacent to the Ostergaard property, the one that transferred to Harmon's holding company 2 years ago. I looked at the notation system, and I knew it was wrong, and I went to the county surveying office and asked who had certified it." She said, "And Fenwick told you he had not wanted to?" He said, "Fenwick told me he had certified it under circumstances he described as coercive, which was as specific as he was willing to be on first meeting. He said, on second meeting he was more specific. He said, by the 3rd meeting, which was 4 days ago, he was willing to come here if it came to that. Fenwick had written to Ostergaard because Ostergaard was the most recent target and the most visible, and because Fenwick was a careful man who had been carrying the discomfort of having certified something he should not have certified, and wanted someone with standing to act on it. Ostergaard had not received the letter. Levi had found it in the saddlebag 2 days after the death, unopened, when he was helping the ranch foreman pack the dead man's personal effects. He had opened it. He had understood immediately what it was. He had sat on the tailgate of the wagon with the letter in his hands for a long time in the cold of the morning, while the foreman worked around him. She said, "You could have come forward then." He said, "I could have." He paused. He said, "I was not ready. I did not have enough." A letter from a surveyor is a letter from a surveyor. Without the instrument itself, and without the connecting document naming Castor and Harmond in the same scheme, a letter from a surveyor is a concern, not a case. He said, "I needed Fenwick to bring the instrument. I needed another 4 weeks." She said, "And then they arrested me." He said, "Yes." She looked at him. She said, 12 days. He said, "I know." The particular weight of that sat between them in the cold of the jail cell, and neither of them moved it. He said, "I have been building a case for 2 years. This letter is one piece of it. If I use it for you, I step into the light before I am ready, and everything I have built collapses if Harmond can discredit me before the full case is presented." She said, "And if you do not use it?" He said, "You go to the territorial prison on a conviction that was designed to remove you before you could think about what Ostergaard's death meant." She said, "I had not thought about what it meant." He said, "I know." He paused. He said, "But you would have." She looked at the letter in her hands. She said, "There is a second document you mentioned, in the surveyor's office." He said, Fenwick kept the original of the forged survey instrument. He has been expecting someone to come and ask for it for 3 years. He said, "I spoke to him 4 days ago and told him the situation had reached the point of requiring action." She said, "Is he willing to come here?" He said, "He is 2 hours out. I sent for him yesterday." She said, "You decided yesterday?" He said, "I decided when I found out the transport was today. The circuit judge was due at noon, the transport wagon at 3. The window was not large." She said, "How do we get me out of this cell?" He said, "The deputy on the door is a man named Tull, who has been the deputy here for 8 years under 2 sheriffs, and who has never been comfortable with what happened in that council room." He said, "I had a conversation with Tull this morning before I came in here." He said, "Tull did not stop me at the door." She said, "Tull is not going to be able to say he did not know." He said, "No." He said, "Tull has made his calculation." He said it without judgment, in the tone of a man who respects a calculation made under genuine pressure. The judge was named Aldous Creel. He was a circuit judge of 15 years standing, who had heard 3,000 cases in 7 counties, and who had, in the opinion of the people who had appeared before him on the right side of the law, a reliable sense of when something was wrong with a proceeding. He arrived in Harlan at 11 in the morning on a horse that had done the night road from the county seat and needed attention, and he went directly to the hotel where the council had arranged his quarters and asked for water for the horse before he asked for anything for himself, which was the kind of detail that said something about a man. Harmond reached him within 20 minutes. Harmond had dressed for the meeting. His traveling suit was freshly brushed, and his hat was clean, and he had the expression of a man who has done the relevant preparation and considers the outcome settled. He told the judge the case was settled, the sentence lawfully rendered by the town council under territorial statute, the prisoner ready for transport, and that the judge's presence was needed only to countersign the transport order, which was a formality that should not take more than 15 minutes of the judge's valuable time. He said the phrase, "valuable time," with the particular inflection of someone who considers time management a form of flattery. Creel listened to all of this. He took the transport order. He began to read it. Creel was still reading the transport order when the hotel door opened. She had a pale linen dress, with the lace cut from the collar, and 12 days of the jail in her complexion, and her honey blonde hair pinned back with the pins she had been wearing when they took her, and she had the letter in her hand. Levi was behind her. Behind Levi was the deputy Tull, who had the expression of a man who has made a decision and is committed to it, and would prefer not to discuss it at length. Harmond looked at her in the doorway. Something left his face that did not come back. She walked to the judge's table and put the letter in front of him without saying anything. She stood back. She did not look at Harmond. She looked at the judge. Creel looked at the letter. He looked at her. He looked at Harmond. Then he picked up the letter. Harmond said, "This woman is an escaped prisoner and should be returned to the jail immediately." Creel said, "This woman is standing in my room, and I am going to hear what she has to say before anyone goes anywhere. Harmond said, "The council's sentence is lawful, and the judge's role here is ministerial, not appellate, and he had no jurisdiction to reopen a settled matter." Creel said, "I have jurisdiction over everything that happens in this county while I am in it, and I am now in it, and I am reading this letter." He said it without looking up. He read the letter. He set it down. He picked it up and read it again, more slowly, moving his finger along one particular line. Harmond looked at Levi. He said, "This man aided an escape from lawful custody. He should be arrested." Creel said, "Nobody is being arrested until I am finished." He was finished in another 30 seconds. He said, "This letter describes a filing discrepancy on the Ostergaard eastern pasture." He said it to the room, not to anyone specifically. He said, "The filing was confirmed 3 days after Ostergaard's death." He said, "The question this raises is whether the filing was prepared in anticipation of the death, which would make it relevant to the question of motive in this proceeding." Harmon's lawyer, a man from the county seat, who had ridden through the night and looked it, said that the letter was hearsay, that it described only a concern and not a fact, that the filing was entirely legal under territorial statute, and that the council's sentence had nothing to do with any land matter. Creel looked at the lawyer. He said, "When I want your analysis, I will ask for it." He said it without any particular heat. He turned to Harmond. Creel said, "Bring me the original filing instrument." Harmond said he did not have it with him. Creel said, "Then we will wait until someone fetches it." He said, "We have time." "The transport does not leave until 3. Harmond looked at the document in Levi's hand, and something left his face that did not come back, because Levi was holding the connecting document, the one he had spent 2 years assembling, the one that named Harmond and Castor across 5 years of land transfers in 3 counties, the one that he had been saving for the moment when the full case could be presented and Harmond could not slip out the side of it. He had not planned to use it today. He had planned to use it when Fenwick arrived with the forged instrument and when the territorial court had been properly notified and when Castor could be brought into the same proceeding. He had planned a case that closed every exit. He handed it across the table in 30 seconds because Ida was standing in the room and the transport wagon was due at 3. Harmond said, "That document is a fabrication." Levi said, "The surveyor is 2 hours out. He has the original forged instrument. He has kept it for 3 years because he was not comfortable certifying it and wanted to be able to speak to it when someone came and asked." Creel looked at the document in his hands. He said, "I am staying my hand on the transport order until I have heard from the surveyor." Harmon's man moved toward the door. Levi was between him and the exit before the man had completed the movement, because Levi had been watching the door the same way he watched all doors, and he had seen the decision form in the man's posture before the posture became an action. The man looked at Levi and at the blue-gray eyes that had not changed in temperature, and the man stopped. The surveyor arrived at 1:30. His name was Fenwick, and he was a thin man with the careful hands of someone whose work depends on precision, and he had brought the original forged instrument in a leather case he had been keeping under his desk for 3 years. He laid it on the table beside Levi's document and Ida's letter. He explained the discrepancy. He said that the notation system used in the instrument was a system that had been adopted by the county's surveying office in the spring of the year in question, but that the instrument itself was dated the previous autumn, which meant it had been prepared using a notation system that did not yet exist at the date on the instrument. He said he had noticed this when he was asked to certify it, and had refused to certify it, and had been told by the man who brought it to him that his concerns would be accommodated, which was a phrase that had stayed with him because of its particular quality of threat, dressed as reassurance. Creel looked at the 3 documents on the table, the letter, Levi's connecting document, and the forged instrument. He said, "The sentence against the prisoner is vacated pending a full territorial court review of the proceedings." He said this to the room, and then he said it to Harmond specifically. He said, "Birch Harmond is placed under formal hold pending the territorial court's investigation of the land filings named in these documents." The sheriff, who had been standing at the back of the room with the expression of a man who had been placed in a difficult position for a long time, and was relieved to have been given a clear direction, placed his hand on Harmond's arm. Harmond looked at it. He said nothing. He had the particular silence of a man whose calculations have all come out wrong simultaneously, and who has not yet found a new one to make. They gave her back her herb pouch. The deputy Tull produced it from a shelf in the jail office, and placed it in her hands without ceremony, which was the right way to do it. She opened it on the spot. She looked at what was inside: the chamomile in its small folded cloth, the willow bark, the elderberry, the packet of ginger. Everything she had prepared for Ostergaard's fever, everything she had used trying to save him. It was all still there. The herbs had spent 12 days on a shelf in the jail office as evidence of a crime that had not been committed. Now they were back in her hands. She closed the pouch and tucked it in her pocket. She stood in the street outside the hotel in the afternoon light. The transport wagon had come at 3 as scheduled, and had left empty shortly after, the driver looking at his orders and at the judge's counter-signature on the revised document, and heading back north without asking questions. She had watched it from the boardwalk, and the watching of it had settled something in her that had been very loud for 12 days. The world had resumed its ordinary noise around her. The street was the same street it had been the morning they arrested her. The buildings were the same buildings. The quality of the afternoon light was the same quality of afternoon light. The only thing different was that she was standing in it, rather than watching it through 3 inches of barred window. Levi came out of the hotel and stood beside her on the boardwalk. She said, "The case you built for 2 years." He said, "It was always going to be used." He said, "It was used today." He said, "Fenwick will testify to the full matter in the territorial court, and the connecting document will be entered as evidence, and Castor will be named in the same proceeding as Harmond." She said, "Is that enough?" He was quiet for a moment. He said, "It is what I have." He said, "It is more than I had 6 years ago in Cimarron County, which is the comparison I keep making." He said it plainly, not asking for anything. She said, "What do you do now?" He looked at the street, at the ordinary business of a frontier afternoon resuming around them, the people going back to the things they had been doing before the transport wagon arrived. He said, "I do not know." He said it with the particular quality of a man who has been oriented toward a single fixed point for a long time, and has arrived at it and found that arriving at it does not provide the next direction automatically. She understood that. She said, "I need somewhere to work." She said, "Ostergaard is gone, but the hands on his ranch still need someone, and the cold is coming, and they will need someone who knows what to do when it arrives." He said, "There are 2 ranches east of town short a healer." She said, "I know." He said, "I have been working both of them." She said, "Then you know which one needs me more." He said, "They both do." He paused. He said, "I will take you out on Monday if you want to see them." She said, "I will start Monday." She said it as a fact rather than a question, which was how she had been saying most things for 12 days, which was the only way there had been to say them. He said, "All right. If Ida's story stayed with you, we would love to know which moment you will carry longest. Was it the morning she read a letter addressed to a dead man and understood what it meant before anyone had told her? Or was it the moment Levi handed across the document he had been writing toward for 2 years in 30 seconds because she was standing in the room? If you know someone who was told to be quiet when they should have been heard, share this story with them. It may be exactly what they need to hear. Like this video if it moved you. If you want more stories from the frontier, subscribe to this channel, and leave us a comment below telling us what you think Ida found in that herb pouch on Monday morning, because we read every one of them. The creek east of Harlan ran clear over flat stones in the early morning, the water cold from the ridge above it, and the stones pale in the first light, and the sound of it carried as far as the ranch house, where the lamp had been burning since before dawn.